Speaker number 3, Jan Camel. Family values. Family values, Jan Camel.
There stands a giant, mighty oak tree, 110 years old, standing there with its enormous branches outstretched in every direction, standing there like a sentinel, tall in front of my childhood home. Madam Contest Chair, fellow Toastmasters, and most welcome guests, I was born in a little town in Ohio, about a mile from Lake Erie, a wonderful place to grow up. There was always lots and lots of family, lots of cousins, aunts and uncles, and grandma and grandpa. And we all lived on the same street where the little school was that we attended. I remember the very first day that I was able to walk home from school by myself in kindergarten. As I walked home from school, I was very afraid. But then I saw the giant oak tree that stands in the front of my home. And I knew, I felt the safety of home. It was then that I learned, growing up, about family values. After school, all the kids would come and they would play around this tree. We'd play Ring Around the Rosie. We'd play hide and seek. The boys would climb on the giant granite boulder in front of the tree and play King of the Hill. Way up high in a branch was the largest tire swing. We had a wonderful time. We played all summer long around this tree. We could never climb the tree because it was far too large. Oh, the simple joys of my childhood. It was a wonderful time. How I wish I could go back to those days. I'm from an Irish heritage. My grandfather came from County Wexford, Ireland. I loved that man. What a great person he was. And oh, the stories he told, the wonderful family reunions that we held, all the fun and the laughter, all the cousins and the aunts and the uncles and nieces and nephews, all of the family is where I learned my family values. My grandfather did pass away, and life goes on. And like the tree, we have to stand tall, even through the driving rain, through the long summer droughts, through the winters with the snow heavy on the boughs, sometimes cracking and splitting the branches from the freezing ice. Just as the tree, though, we blossom again in the springtime, making new branches, new cousins, new aunts and uncles, each tiny little leaf, a new and dear member of our family tree. We learned those family values then, and how I hold them dear now. I like to instill on my children what I've learned. All the stories, the wonderful things that we held dear from those days, so that they can get an idea of who they are and where they come from. Those family values that we hold dear. I still remember my mother as she laughed when my brothers and my sister and I would say, "Mom, Mom, tell us the story about when you were little." And she would look up into her memory and tell us a story of how her little kitten was stuck in a tree one day. And she bravely climbed every branch to rescue her kitten until she realized it was her that was stuck in the tree, as the kitten playfully jumped to the ground and ran away. Or the story my mother told of how Grandmother Walsh, my Irish grandmother in her Irish voice, would say, "Come everyone, and let's get into the machine. We're going for a drive." That crazy contraption, of course, was that newfangled thing called the automobile. My mother also told the story of how she wore the bandages on her legs for nearly 2 years after burning herself and catching on fire, roasting apples in the orchard of the family farm. These stories are important, even though some are hard to listen to, hard to remember and pass on. They're important because we need to pass on the stories that we learn from our elders onto our children to help them know who they are, to bring home those family values. As I recall the wonderful stories, I recall that magnificent family tree in our front yard. Recently, I called my sister in Ohio after I began to write this speech, and I asked her, "Have you driven by recently? How big is the tree now?" And she sadly looked at me and told me, "They've cut the tree down. It's not there anymore. It's gone." This made me realize even more how important it is to keep those family histories and those family stories alive, to pass them on to our children. I encourage my kids, and I encourage you, when you go and visit your elders, your grandparents, older aunts and uncles, take a notepad with you and a tape recorder. Jot down those memories in time and hold them dear, for they are part of the strength of your family tree. Let them stand strong like that giant oak once stood.